Pick up the phone, I really need to talk with you. Cause if you're not home, I wonder where you slept last night. Are you seeing someone new behind my back? Just another dude's for a little romance. Pick up the phone, I really need to understand. Never had no trust issues, never had to break the rules. Always trying to tell the truth and care about what I say. I've been trying to do my best and keeping my promises. Never want a second guess, but when it comes to you, I've been feeling hesitant.
Hey, it's Deedee Rich, and I'm back again with another episode of the Relationship Within the podcast series. And this evening, you guys, I want to talk about living in the ego. Living in the ego. Before I get started, I want to encourage you guys to go and get you a copy of my new book, Compatibility versus Suitability. In this book, I'm talking about connections and how we meet people, but more importantly, how we connect to the world as individuals. The internal things that's going on within us that cause us to have different types of connections, reactions, relationship situations with people. It's just a topic that a lot of people don't really discuss when it comes to us evolving and us eventually getting in a space where we can have healthy relationships with not only our significant other, but family, children, our relationship with everything else also outside in the world, our money, our reality. And so it's just a great topic. You can go over to Amazon and you can get you a copy. I'll post the link below. And so with that being said, let's get on to the topic of this evening, living in the ego. What is the ego? And how does it affect us when we are on our journey to evolution, when we are trying to develop relationships in particular? The ego is something that in most cases it holds us back more than it compels us forward. Even though the ego, or some people may refer to it as the shadow self, is something that can be a positive as well as a negative. It can only be a positive when we have transformed ourselves, when we have learned to evolve whatever those things are. And I use myself as an example in this because I think we all have an ego, even though we, most people say, "Oh, I don't have an ego. I'm level-headed. I'm down to earth. And it really has little to do with that. When I look at the shadow self, or the shadow, the things that we bring into this world, our false realities, our ideas, our paradigms of what the world is and what it consists of. What does love mean? What does relationships mean? How I see men, how a man may see a woman. All this hides within your ego, and it shows up in your relationships with people, because depending on what that false belief is, or that idea that you've created in your mind, it could affect the outcome of the situation. And so when I look at myself, I look back on my ideas of what, just in general, overall, a household look like, what it should feel like, what I expected from my mate. And my ego was holding me back in a lot of ways, because I say to myself now, when I look at it, I had to learn that a person coming into a situation with another person, it's not about expectations. Expectations ruin the situation. And in some cases, it's really hard not to have expectations. People say, oh, well, you should have some type of guideline as to what you're looking for in a person. Uh, but what you're really ultimately looking for is balance within yourself. And so if you are first understanding yourself and understanding what you need, where you're lacking, where you need to be balanced, then when a person comes in, it's not about expectations. It's just a natural understanding that, hey, this is the thing that's missing, you know? But our ego can get in the way of that because, my ego might say, to me, well, hey, I need a guy that's going to compliment me all the time because, hey, my ego needs to be stroked because, hey, that's what I need. I need to feel good. And I feel like my mate should come in and he should be a guy that's, uplifting me all the time. Now, granted, that may be a great asset to bring into the connection, but that's something you have to do for yourself. But see, the ego can fool you into that reality because maybe that's what I saw growing up. Not saying that was, but I'm saying maybe that's what I saw on TV perhaps. All these men looking up to women and holding them on this almost a pedestal, when I think of that, I always think of this image that I see often online and on television of the guy and the girl somewhere exotic, and the girl is running and jumping into his arms and he's holding her up. Now, in my mind, I go back to the images of a baby and a baby being held up in the air and swung around. And so for me, I just feel like it's a false reality. That's something that babies do. And there's a lot of us women out there that want this fantasy of almost like the father holding the baby up in the air and twirling them around, and all these women want to be picked up and and just treated a certain way. And I'm not saying that we should not be treated well as women, because I'm a woman and I definitely want to be treated well. However, I also want to be in reality of things, and I think your ego can take you in a place where you're not real with yourself. You live in a fake, false life, and it's like you can get in a connection, and because that guy is not somewhere you running into his arms and he's twirling you around, that doesn't mean that you're not receiving love. And that's what I mean by the ego getting in the way of your reality. The ego makes us believe things sometimes to the extent to where we don't want to grow. We don't want to hear the truth. We don't want to hear from others that there is something we need to fix or correct. So living in our shadow self and living in that reality of just oftentimes for me, I look at it as a way for us to kind of create a shield. We're shielding ourselves from what we perceive to be pain. You got people living in an ego that maybe they have abandonment issues and they have a hard time opening up and telling people how they feel, expressing their love, just being real and being vulnerable. That's your ego standing in the way of you being able to receive your blessings, because the more you love, the more you receive love. The more you're able to express yourself from a deep knowing, the more you are opened up, and the more is revealed to you. So the ego is a deadly thing, but we all spend majority of our lives trying to overcome this. I think this topic is something that a lot of us, we discuss it. I've heard people try to, discuss it here and there, but they don't really really go into the depths of it. You know, none of us want to tell the truth about how we perceive ourselves in the world. You know, I mean, do you have too much pride? You know, are you too prideful to the point where you can't apologize to a person, or you can't, say how you feel? That's not a good thing. That's living in your ego. So, in other words, your ego has become yourself. It's the thing that people see first. It's the thing that people experience. And if that ego is negative or not of your higher self, then that's what we're presenting to the world. We're presenting a reality of ourselves that we don't really want the world to see us that way. But we can't help ourselves because the ego is controlling us. And so I really just encourage people to, try to overcome the ego. Look it in its face. Don't allow yourself to be afraid. That's another thing that comes from the ego. Fear, doubt, things that hold us back. When people feel nervous, anxiety. I've heard people say they have depression. A lot of these things come from the ego and things, false realities that we've told ourselves, things we're feeding ourselves in our mind to believe that it's true. And in fact, it's not. And so we're holding ourselves back from being able to be our best selves, to being able to go out into the world and have the best connections and the best relationships in all facets of life, not only with people, but with our money, with our situation, mentally, spiritually, emotionally, physically. You become rich because the more you evolve from the ego, the more you evolve the ego and you chip away at the things that are, need healing, then your reality becomes different. Your world completely changes. You're able to see things in a different way. You're able to receive things in a different way. But when the ego's in the way, you can't even make really sound decisions because your ego won't let you. You got some men and women who do that. Maybe the man think, I'm a man. And, I just can't do this and that. I'm not going to show up the way she wants me to because I'm a man. And men don't do that. That's the ego talking to you. That's the ego guiding your life and controlling you. Vulnerability is one of the most powerful tools that we have. Being able to be vulnerable with yourself is you allowing yourself to show up in as your real self in real time. So when you're not vulnerable, you always find yourself hiding behind something, whether it be money, religion, looks, clothes. You'll find yourself hiding all the time. That's not a good feeling. No one wants to hide. No one wants to not be able to express themselves in their fullness. And that's not what God intended, because God put us here on this earth for a reason. And so we're here to do our jobs, but how can we do our jobs if we're hiding behind our ego? If we're shielding ourselves from pain sometimes. We don't want to be hurt. So we stop loving. We stop, allowing people to come in and love us. We stop trying to feel because our ego told us, hey, I don't like that. That ain't working for us. And I always say, we have control over ourselves. But oftentimes people allow the flesh and everything that comes with it to control themselves, to have control over them. And the ego definitely derives from the flesh because it's part of our thinking. It comes from our thinking, our mindset. And the mind is the most powerful part of the body, right? The flesh. It controls everything. you can't even get up and open the door without telling yourself to do it first. So, with that being said, like I said, I encourage you guys to go grab my new book. And not just because it's my book, but I want to bless you guys with this conversation. I feel like it's something that God wanted me to put out into the universe and start a conversation around. And I think you guys will really enjoy the content and the conversation in the book. And so go grab my book. It's under Deedee Rich on Amazon. Like I said, I'll post the link below. If you like these topics that I'm talking about and you'd like to expound on them or come on and have a conversation with me, we can get on a Zoom and we can have a nice conversation. The relationship within is all things that's dealing with self and how that relates to the world outside of us. So, from our relationships with all facets of life, our relationships can stem from so many things. You know, we have emotional attachment to things. We have a physical attachment to things, a spiritual attachment, you know, mental attachment to things. Why do we have those attachments? You know, and this is why I'm bringing up topics like I'm talking about the ego here, because these things that we're attached to all stem from self. You know, I hear people talk about self-love, but I feel like that's like just scratching the surface. Like the title self-love is so minute to what is really going on when it comes to self and harnessing the power of self. It's such a small concept to say self-love. So we just got to dove off into this relationship we're having with ourselves so we can understand more about the universe inside of us and the things we're projecting out into the world. So with that being said, you guys, I hope you guys have a blessed evening. I'm going to leave you with peace. And till next time, talk to you soon.
Hesitant. I've been feeling hesitant. I've been feeling hesitant. Get out my bed if you've been unfaithful. Pack all your things and bury our label. Yeah. 'Cause baby, I won't take you back. Yeah, you know my heart don't work like that. Take what I said, throw it like a baseball.